We work so you can play.
Matthew here from MiniWarGaming.com, and this is a rules you got wrong. So we do these types of videos every once in a while when there's a particular battle report where either we got a lot of things wrong or they're new, such as the Tyranids versus Necrons battle report with the new Tyranids. So I actually knew I was going to be making one of these before we even played the game, because when you start a new codex, you're going to get lots of things wrong. So it's some people say, you know, that the name of this series is weird because it's rules you got wrong. So is it rules you got wrong or rules you got wrong? And the answer is both. Because what I do is all the comments that you guys put about the rules we got wrong, I copy and paste them, print them off, and then address them. And some of them you're right, and some of them you're wrong. And some of them I have to look up just to make sure. And it's interesting the types of things that people get wrong. Now sometimes other users will reply to those comments, but I'm still going to do that here. And if it's the same rule that people repeat more than once, I only copy and paste the first person who said that. And so to start this off, we got Philomillipede, who says, already making mistakes I see. And then flicking tongue out, safe. Hype Tyrant is BS4 now, so he hits on 3s these days. I remember when I first read that, I was like, what? Seriously? That's awesome. And it's interesting because looking through all this stuff in the Tyranid Codex, you're looking at the new special rules, the new psychic powers, their new weapons, but you don't think to look at the basic stat line, except the Hive Guard, for some reason, I noticed that they were BS3 instead of BS4. So it's great. Hive Tyrants are now ballistic skill 4, which makes their Twin Link Devourers even awesomer. Warhammer 116. Flying monstrous creatures can't swoop on turn 1. They have to glide, since the big red book says, or the big rule book says on page 29, that flying monstrous creatures start the game gliding and can only choose to change it at the start of their movement phase, meaning that they cannot swoop on turn 1. Now it's interesting because you clearly read the book when it said that they had to start gliding, but then you go on and say something that wasn't even in the rule book. The rule book actually says when they start to move, not at the beginning of the movement phase, but when they are about to move, they declare if they're going to be swooping or gliding. So they're allowed to change it. If they start on the board, they have to start gliding. That's true. But as soon as they go to move, they can switch. And why does this matter? It's because if the opponent goes first, they're on the ground and so can fire at them. But no, first turn, get up, go. And so you're definitely allowed to do that. Leon Depinda, Dear Matthew, all Necron vehicles are open topped, including the Walker in the beginning. Also, he didn't have a cover save because the weapons are ignore cover. Those are two big things that would have blown it up the first turn. In this case, managed to destroy it in the next turn, but it could have made a big difference having destroyed it right away. Flicks Gaming Stuff. Isn't the new Venomthrope rule models within 6 inches get shrouded rather than units? That is correct. However, the shrouded rule says that if one model in the unit has it, the entire unit has it. I'm not quite sure why, because the whole new rulebook thing in 6th edition allows it to go by model for cover saves. So why they would make the shrouded rule all of a sudden affect everybody else, I'm not quite sure. But they do. So it actually makes Venomthropes awesome. Just super awesome. Mr. Mono 187, a few things. In order to facilitate learning, Hive Tyrant is BS4, and the Spores can only run or charge half the distance that you roll. That's correct. I don't think there was any point where they went further than that. I know I rolled the run and I didn't specify that they're moving path, but they didn't go very far. Tungsten Cat, wow, no new Tyranid models. They just came out, right? I don't play with gray models, so they gotta get painted first. So you gotta wait a little bit before you see new Tyranid models. Seamus Porter, the monolith is a heavy, all its weapons fire at full ballistic skills, ARG! It was all caps. If you go to page 71, you realize that when you fire an Ordnance weapon, so guys are going by because they're setting up a new office thing. When you fire Ordnance weapon, all your other weapons fire at snap fire, or snapshots. Doesn't matter if you're heavy, doesn't matter if you stay stationary, doesn't matter at all. It's kind of interesting that they made him a heavy vehicle because it really is more disadvantaged than an advantage because his main weapon is Ordnance. But yeah, that's what Ordnance does. Jordan Guillory. The Tyrant doesn't have a 360 fire arc. He is the exact same as a flyer in that he can only shoot at what is in front of him. Also, he can't swoop on the first turn if he is deployed. He must remain on the ground. Now, I understand why you'd think that, but nowhere does it say that. So just make sure, and I find this happens quite often, and so in some ways it's kind of forced me to become more of a rules Nazi. I don't trust what anybody says anymore when they tell me how a certain rule works. I'm like, really, are you sure? And if they're even like a hesitant moment that they're not quite sure, I'll look it up. And that's because we do it on battle reports, and so I know if I get it wrong in the battle report, it's going to get called out, so I have to be even more careful. But something like that is a good example. You say that with that confidence, and yet It doesn't say that in the book. In fact, it says that on page 49 under the heading Swooping Hunters that they can fire in any direction, just like any other infantry model. Because a flying monstrous creature is not a flyer. It's a monstrous creature that has its own special rules. So they can definitely fire whatever direction they want, and they can definitely swoop on the first turn. Shadow Saber 22. Matt, are you still using the old fleet rule? I see you rolling 3 dice a lot. Fleet allows you to reroll 1 or both dice instead of rolling 3. No, I was just charging through difficult terrain is probably what you saw. Kyle Gutierrez. Awesome game. Though, didn't the Rays have whips, meaning that the Hormagaunts would go at initiative 1? Only one of them did, and it wasn't in base contact. Keaton Callaghan. Oh, and Warp Blast is only 18 inches. That's incorrect. Warp Blast has 2 fire modes. One of them at 24 inches, which is the Strength 5 AP 3 Blast, small blast, and one which is 18 inches, which is the Strength 10 AP 2 Lance. Marco Bayardo. The spiders have 3 wounds, not 2. I probably said 2, but I think most of the time they're getting insta-killed anyways. Undead Pank. Is it me or is a Necron player actually a really nice opponent? That is correct. Steve is incredibly nice. I smacked a gun. Shadows in the Warp now causes -3 leadership to all units in 12 inches. That would be awesome, but it's not true. It specifically says Psychers, Brotherhood of Psychers, and Psychic Pilots get -3 leadership. And it doesn't say -3 leadership to their Psychic test, just -3 in total. So that's kind of nice. But not to everybody. That would be super overpowered. Share. Is there something special rule about Tyranids? Because I know in 6th edition everything can fire Overwatch aside from blast weapons, regardless of range. It is assumed they run into range and are then fired upon. Well, on page 21 it doesn't say anything about regardless of range. It says actually using the rules for range. So the way that Overwatch works is I declare a charge, and you then say if you're going to Overwatch. If you can Overwatch, of course. If you're already engaged, you can't. And when you say yes, I'm going to Overwatch, before I do anything else, you roll your Overwatch. So you fire at them, the cover, the range, all those modifiers are there. I'm not sure what you're referring to here, because if somebody declares a charge, they have to be within 12 inches, and most weapons will have range on that. So yeah. Brian Dennery. Hormagaunts are still fleet, right? If so, Matt could be re-rolling his run rolls with them and add the 3 inches. I guess it only mattered when he didn't roll high. I actually forgot that. I remember their fleet, but I always use that like in their charging. I forget about for runs. So that's a good point, which makes them even better for trying to get really high runs. Stephen Bradbury. The Flyrant is also Master Level 2 now. That is correct, but his other spell I just wasn't using. I think it was Dominion, and I just never needed to use it. Greg Harrison. Instinctive behavior only happens when they fail the leadership test due to being out of synapse. That's right. I don't know when we did it otherwise. Justin Messer. Forgot to Vector Strike with the Hive Tyrant turn 2 after going over the Scarabs. I didn't actually. Well, I didn't think about it at all, but I couldn't have done it anyways, because if you Vector Strike, you can only fire 1 of your weapons instead of 2. And he had 2 Twin Link Devourers, and so I fired both of those. So I wouldn't have been able to Vector Strike and do that. Also, you declare what's charging all at once. He could have Overwatched the Spiders or the Scarabs in turn 2. This is another thing that people seem to get wrong. That is very incorrect. The basic rule, if you read in the Assault phase how it works, it actually has it spelled out nice and simply there. Declare what's charging. Opponent declares Overwatch, or not, if they can't. Then you resolve Overwatch. Then you charge. They charge in. And then it says repeat for every other unit that you want to charge. So you don't declare them all at once. You say that one's going to charge. Do you want to Overwatch? You don't know what else I'm going to do. And then they decide. And so that's why you can like send in little units to kind of eat the Overwatch. So that's definitely how it works. Because when you said that, I was like, what? I've been playing it like this all along. And I looked it up, I'm like, okay. Because it's one of those rules where I knew it for so long that I stopped looking up that rule. And so when somebody pointed it out, I'm like, oh, maybe I'm doing it wrong. And I looked it up and I'm like, nope, that's not right. I mean, what they posted was not right. Mick Miller, did the 3rd Spore cluster ever make it to the board? I forgot about it. Didn't really matter too much. Sargsnu, you still get to reroll 1s, and then if you fail, you do your twin linked. That is very incorrect and would be super overpowered. You can never reroll a die more than once. Never. There's never a situation where you get to roll, and then reroll, and then reroll. It's only ever 1 reroll. So, Corkinator. Moloch rolls for scatter first, then you resolve the pie plate. Yes, but the first one that came in was 6 inches away from the Lictor, or the Death Leaper, so he does not scatter. Nick Atkins, that Flamer Strength 8 should have insta-gib 2 warriors. That's right. I was just so used to the fact that he was just wounding on 2s because because of the whole marked thing that we forgot that it was strength 8, but that would have insta-killed some warriors. Derek 147900. I just started watching these about 2 weeks ago. I was always annoyed that Matt wasn't measuring his movements. Then it dawned on me that he has one hand on the camera. Herp-la-derp. I actually wrote that. That's true. I actually measure and then I film and I move them. So it might be off by a quarter of an inch, but I do my best. Amia 4. Carnifexes ignore hurting themselves due to being fearless and instead treat a roll of 1 to 3 as 4 or 5. That is incorrect. The lurk, instinctive behavior lurk, if you're fearless, you ignore 1 to 3. Carnifexes would ignore it if they were by themselves. If it's a lone unit, then they treat it as a 4 to 5. But note, when they're in a group and they roll 1 to 3, they attack themselves, and it's pretty sad. Shamabadoo. Come on, Matt. The Hormagaunts clearly charged through difficult terrain to reach the rays. After looking at that and rereading that rule, I'm like, yeah, you're right. Because if they got to go that line, you just got to do that. Yeah. Petite Billy. On the Tyranid's first turn, you tried to cast Paroxysm. You can't possibly be in range in your first turn if you follow the BRB's deployment. You both have to deploy more than 12 inches from the middle, meaning you're more than 24 inches apart. Deployment is 12 inches on each side. And if you can deploy right up to that line. And if both players deploy right up to that line, you'll be within 24 inches first turn. Petite Billy. Is Imhotep's Stormlord ability classified as shooting attack? Because if it's not, it won't cause a grounding test. That's the one I forgot to look up. So, flying. It doesn't matter. I need to look up if it even matters. So, grounded test. If a flying monster creature that is swooping suffers 1 or more hits from a unit's shooting attack, it must take a grounded test immediately. No, it is not a shooting attack. So no, I would not have to make that. Although it makes sense that if lightning strikes him, he would possibly fly out of the air. But no, you're correct. I should not have made grounding tests on that one. Jep. Also, the night fighting of Imhotep is checked at the start of Necron player from turn 2 and above. So the non-Necron player doesn't know in his turn if it would end. I forgot to check that one too. But that sounds right. Jep, also something I noticed that you said that the Death Leaper has 5 attacks in his first combat. He actually has 6. 4 base, 1 for Rending Claws, Scything Talons, 1 for the charge. That is right. Being a Tyranid player from before, I wasn't used to actually looking at the weapons as adding attacks. They always added something else. But you're right, that since he had Scything Talons and Rending Claws, that's 2 close combat attacks. They're not specialists, so they would add an additional attack, which is awesome. Sergeant Smith 95. I thought that Ordnance weapons negate cover saves, such as the Necron Monolith Particle Whip. When you got cover, you don't get cover from it. That is incorrect. Ordnance does not mention anywhere about negating cover. Barrage negates cover, and there are some Ordnance barrage weapons that you may be familiar with that may have been doing what you're thinking of. Power Ranger. Forgot to Vector Strike with the Hive Tyrant. It was a really good, entertaining game. I already talked about that, and thank you. Osirisk69. Although I did forget when he flew off the board, I could have Vector Strike then. Matt, at 1 hour and 15 seconds-ish, you took a cover save before you took a Lookout Sir. I'm pretty sure you have to declare Lookout Sir, roll for Lookout Sir, and then you roll for cover. Unless I am wrong, then you can just pimp slap my dog. This is something that's also commonly done incorrectly, although it's understandable because it's a little weird. Lookout Sirs, here's your kind of test. Do I do a Lookout Sir before or after rolling saves? The question you ask is, are there different types of saves that would have to be made? Or does everybody have the same type of save? So for example, some are in cover, some aren't. Or somebody has a 2+ save and somebody else has a 3+. Or it's an AP2 weapon and a couple guys have invulnerable saves. If those are different, those are mixed saves. If they're mixed saves, then you have to declare the Lookout Sir as soon as it gets to them. If they all have the same save, then you can just roll all the saves first and then do the Lookout Sirs. Mathematically, actually, it works out the same. If they all have the same save, doing the Lookout Sir first and then making the saves, or vice versa, that's all the same thing. Because let's say you have 10 guys with the guy in front and they're all the same save, let's say they're 5+, and you roll it, and let's say there was 5 wounds, and you roll it and you make 3 of those saves, so 2 of them fail. Well, if you had done your Lookout Sirs first, and put them on, like, let's say you failed all 5, let's just say, and let's say you did your Lookout Sirs first, then you put that on the other guys, then whatever ones he failed the Lookout Sirs, well, it's just getting complicated. Just trust me on it. You could do the math yourself, but if they all have the same save, then you roll the saves, then you do the Lookout Sirs. If they have mixed saves, then you do Lookout Sirs first, once it gets to that guy, and then you do the saves after. That's how you can remember. Arc Thunder. Matt, Hormagaunts out fleet. You may re-roll your run moves if you want. I already covered that one. I thought I didn't put duplicates, but thank you. Mpengaloo. On the Molochs, you place the model, including position and facing, and then roll to scatter, ignored due to Death Leaper, but maintaining the facing. So keep that in mind when trying to place the Moloch. Normally it doesn't matter, but will with vehicles and oval bases. The Moloch's actually a little different. Let me just quickly open to that. Moloch, you don't actually place the Moloch. Okay. When arriving from deep, oh no, actually you're right. A Moloch can choose a deep strike onto a point occupied by another model, friend or foe. Roll for scatter as normal. If a Moloch deep strikes into a point occupied by another model, do not roll on the deep strike mishap. Instead, place the large blast, all units except flyers, blah 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 blah. If, after removing casualties, it is now possible to place the Moloch on the table on the spot where the blast marker landed. See, this is where the difference is. So if it scatters, or if it ends on guys, you put the blast marker down, and then it says, if it's possible to place it where the blast marker was. So you can really orient it however you want. Even then do so, even if this is within 1 inch of another model, but not if it would be in base contact with or occupying the same space as another model. If it is not possible to place the Moloch, replace the large blast and do it again. So normally, you're right, you place the model, then you scatter it, although facing rarely makes a difference, especially for monstrous creatures, although it's an oval base. But this one actually says that you place the large blast and then you try to place the model where that large blast was. So it doesn't specify that it has to be facing the same way, it just has to fit in there. So it's a little different, a little weird. Ty9999. Also, how are Carnifexes putting out 36 shots? Devours are Assault 6, Strength 6, Twin Linked. That should be 18 shots for all of them. That is right, but they each have 2 sets of Twin Linked Devours, which is awesome, because then they each get 12 shots. So yes, that is legal. I had to pay for them, of course. You pay the extra points, but that's a lot of shots. Strength 6, Twin Linked is awesome. I love it. Trig 2. So I am looking at page 65 of the Nid Codex, and in the floating death rule, it specifically states that spore mines do not attack. I understand this to mean that you do not have to assault them. That's funny that you would say that, because right on that same page, it talks about how they have to assault. So floating death, they move 3 inches, they run or charge, they move half the distance, they run or charge, the fact that it says charge. They're never slowed by difficult, but mistake dangerous. They do not attack in close combat. Instead, at initiative step 10, the entire cluster detonates. So then what you do is you put a large blast over one of them, and then you add +1 strength for every extra spore mine that's there, up to a maximum of like 8, I think, I can't remember. But no, they don't attack, but at initiative 10 they explode. So in order, it's the only way they actually explode, because there's no other reference in the rules that say when they die they explode, or when they get within 1 inch of a model they can explode. All that's gone. That's kind of the way it used to be. And now the only way that you can get them to explode if they're on the board rather than being shot out of a biovore or something, is for them to actually charge in. The problem with that is they'll mostly die to Overwatch, but there's ways to get around that. For example, in the battle report that I did, I didn't even care about getting them in, I just cared about them eating the Overwatch. So he had a choice. They were like 1 inch away, so if he didn't Overwatch them, then they would just tie him up and he wouldn't be able to Overwatch anyways, and then they'd explode and do some damage. And of course he didn't want that. So that's how they work. They're a little funky, but and they're really cheap too, so if you have fast attack slots, you might as well throw them in there. So thank you for all your comments. We've already done our next 40k battle report. Dan, former MiniWarGamer Dan, or Codex Dan, actually played against me, so you can look forward to that battle report coming out next week. The new Tyranids versus the old orcs, and we actually had some really close games, and it was a lot of fun. So thank you again for your comments. This is Matthew from MiniWarGaming. Happy wargaming.